This is our time. Elevate, elevate.
Good morning, folks. Hope you're doing well on this beautiful Wednesday morning, April 22nd. It's a beautiful day to be alive. Spring is almost here. It's still a little cold, but it's getting there. And I'm excited about that, and I'm excited to get into some political discussions with all of you this morning. Oh, baby. Lots going on. Of course, you've seen the SPLC fraud investigation in the United States. Hey. And you're going to be wondering why we started off with American politics, Josh. Well, it's because they got connections to a certain network up here that we're going to be talking about that we've very much for a long time realized that they are nothing but a fraudulent organization on so many levels. And maybe this is the beginning of looking into them. Maybe, just maybe. We'll see. I won't hold my breath. But alas, we're going to be talking about them today. As well, we're going to get into what happened yesterday. You know, we saw if you were able to watch yesterday afternoon's video where Mr. Pierre Poilievre decided to take the fight to the Liberals. He went into their side of Parliament outside their caucus meeting, or I should say their cabinet meeting, walked by all the reporters, and they're like, what are you doing here? You shouldn't be here. He's like, yeah, guess what? I want to talk about Mark Carney. I want to talk about Mark Carney and his rhetoric, his lack of action. Nothing happening. I'm here to talk about that. He answered some questions, was there for about 3, 4, 5 minutes, and then bounced. As he leaves, the reporters all look at each other, saying, well, that was weird. What was he doing here? That was odd. It was odd. And so that was just simply the pretext, the intro, the taste test of what Pierre Poilievre was bringing to the House Commons later that day in question period. He made sure, typically in question period, the questions are dispersed across a fair amount of different MPs. Yesterday, Pierre Poilievre made sure to take the lion's share of those questions and just took it to him, and that was just fascinating to watch. And it's relatively old news because if you watch Moose on the Loose, he would have covered it last night. However, it's just too good not to cover, so we will talk about it. But as well, we will also discuss the fact of, I don't know, Canada's lead negotiator giving it a very different vibe, a different message than our own prime minister. She's saying, wow, U.S. is our most important client. We need to fix this relationship. We need to get that figured out. And Mark Carney is saying, it's a weakness. Let's stop relying on him. The rupture. Can't do it no more. Different messaging. We're discussing all that this morning. But however, there's a breaking news story that we're going to start off with before we get into all that I think definitely needs our attention. But before we do all that, the chat is looking beautiful this morning. You are looking fantastic. Everyone just talking about all the stuff today. It's fantastic to see. Love you all very much and seeing all the stuff that you are currently doing. Marcon Blanco making sure he's in the chat nice and early, saying good morning from your friendly American neighbors. Thank you so much, because it's about to get, I'm going to talk about some interesting stuff happening. And then Bandit249 says, morning, Josh. Yes, I give Poilievre much respect for that power play move to talk to the media. Yes, he's not pulling any punches anymore. It's game time. It's game time now. They stole our democracy. They stole a majority. And now there's nothing really left to lose. So let's put our best foot forward, shall we? So let's talk about our first story. First story of the day, before we get into all the stuff we just discussed. This was breaking as if within the last hour or so. This is fascinating. All right. Hold yourself ready for this one. Liberals are screeching over this, okay? The left wing base, the elbows at base are screeching over this right now. All right. And I have some things to say about this, but let's read the article first. Washington is demanding entry fee from Ottawa before trade talks, sources say. It's time to pay to play, Ottawa. I just want you to kind of just take this in right now. Just breathe in, soak it all in of what this headline is right now. Hilarious. The Trump administration is demanding what amounts to an entry fee from Canada to engage in trade talks toward a revised Canada-United States-Mexico free trade agreement, or sources told Radio-Canada. The Americans are setting conditions before negotiations begin, said one high-ranking individual familiar with the matter. Three sources use the term entry fee to describe concessions the U.S. administration is seeking before formal trade talks begin. The U.S. demand, who also confirmed by former Quebec Premier Jean Charest, who was appointed Tuesday to Prime Minister Mark Carney's new advisory committee on Canada-U.S. economic relations. Trump wants us to make a lot of concessions before we sit down at the table, Charest told Radio-Canada. Meanwhile, he wouldn't make any. On the U.S. side, there are suggestions that Canada should try to get Trump's attention by making an immediate concession, especially since the president is juggling several major issues right now. However, Canadian sources said they have twice offered concessions to the U.S. administration without receiving anything in return. Last spring, Ottawa dropped a significant portion of the reciprocal counter tariffs it had put forward as a retaliatory measure against the tariffs on steel and aluminum imposed by Washington. That's a funny one. At the end of June, Canada also scrapped the digital services tax, which would all have imposed a 3% levy on the Canadian revenues of digital giants such as Amazon, Apple, and Meta. The repeal of the digital services tax will significantly advance negotiations on a new economic and security partnership with the United States. Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne said at the time. More than 9 months later, however, negotiations do not appear to have made any progress. Oh, dear me. There's so much to say about this, isn't there? I see the chat. The chat's flying right now. Just losing their minds over this. It's hilarious. So, the framing of this is fascinating. They call it an entry fee. Yeah, okay. I could see how you got there. I could see how that could you could deem it that way. Where we already said, the Canadians are saying that we've made concessions already, and you've done nothing with them. Your concessions are imposing illegal. Okay, you got this? Your concessions were taking off illegal tariffs. Okay? Your concessions were taking off illegal tariffs on American goods that were covered under USMCA. Cosmo. That was your concession. You would have illegally applied tariffs to goods that were not covered under USMCA. Or sorry, that were covered under USMCA, Cosmo. That was a big deal for us to be able to do that. Even though it was hurting us as much as it was maybe hurting you. But yeah, it was a big deal for us to do that. Then we're taking off the DST, another tax on a tax on a tax. Citing, again, the likes of the Online News Act. It was a very similar tax to that, similar idea. It was a terrible idea, a terrible policy in the first place. And those are the two concessions they are bragging about. They're illegally applied tariffs and taking out the DST. We made concessions, baby. If that's not this liberal government in a nutshell, I don't know what is. So, here they are whining that, whoa, but now we have to make concessions to even get their attention? Well, let me just kind of rewind the tape a little bit here. You're this close to a deal in October, and you blew it up with something stupid. Then you kept making fun and laughing in the face of industries in the United States that you're causing pain to. You were bragging about it on stage. So the hubris was so real that, and the arrogance so real that you bragged about it again on your liberal convention stage, publishing it on the internet, which I know might be new to left-wing supporters, but it does get viewed outside this country. I know our laws dictate that we see certain things, but the internet is viewed by the outside world for now here in this country. So they caught wind of that. Americans caught wind of that. And now they're got you over the barrel because we are in so much economic pain right now. And they know it. And you can disagree and saying, well, they shouldn't be doing this to their neighbor right now. Sure, you can make that argument. But the reality is what the reality is. They are using it as leverage. And you keep putting the thumb in their eye. We're going to go to China. We're going to join the EU. And you didn't think that was going to have any type of negative reaction? None whatsoever? Okay. So it is a little rich to me. Seeing them sit here now saying, Well, now they want more from us? That's not fair. We don't even get this. They want us to make concessions before we even sit down with them? This is ridiculous. It took you a year to put an advisory council together. You never cared about this. Now don't pretend you care now. Do not pretend that you care now. Here we are. That's the breaking news this morning, folks. The chat is lined up right now. You guys are flying. It is wild. It is wild to see what continues to happen. And so that's the breaking story this morning. But let's get into our core story this morning. What our headline was. U.S. Southern Poverty Law Center charged with fraud over use of paid informants. From Reuters. The Trump administration obtained a criminal indictment on Tuesday charging the Southern Poverty Law Center, a civil rights group that tracks political extremists, with defrauding its own donors by using paid informants to infiltrate far-right organizations. The 11-count indictment returned by a federal grand jury in Alabama levels charges of wire fraud, bank fraud, and conspiracy to commit money laundering against the SPLC as an organization. No individuals or other entities were named as defendants. And this is a little bit of the press conference of this announcement.
Today, a few minutes ago, in the Middle District of Alabama, a grand jury returned an 11-count indictment charging the Southern Poverty Law Center with 6 counts of wire fraud, 4 counts of bank fraud, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit money laundering. In total, according to the indictment, between 2014 and 2023, SPLC paid at least $3 million to 8 individuals at least. These individuals were affiliated with the Ku Klux Klan, United Klans of America, National Socialist Movement, Aryan Nations Affiliated Sadistic Souls Motorcycle Club, the Nationalist Socialist Party of America, Nazis, and the American Front.
Can you explain again what the fraud is here exactly? Are you saying it's illegal for the SPLC to pay money to people that are in hate groups, or something about the way this was done?
As the indictment points out, there's different ways that they raise money, and in no fundraising efforts that the investigation found did they say, oh, and by the way, we're going to give $1 million to the Ku Klux Klan. So that's fraud. So that's wire fraud. So, and then the bank fraud part of it is you have KYC, you have an obligation to tell your financial institution what the corporation or the entity that you're opening an account for does, and the allegations in the indictment are that these were fictitious companies that were set up, and so there was certain information sworn to by SPLC executives about what the entities were doing that we allege is false.
So, kind of the story at this point in time is the SPLC was, we'll just try to steelman this argument as best as possible and try to give as much of a good faith argument that we can here. The SPLC is very much involved in trying to track down essentially far-right groups, is tracking far-right groups and trying to infiltrate them and try to foil any plans they may have. So in doing so, and this happens at the government level as well when they're dealing with different countries and trying to infiltrate specific groups, is you'll find a weak point in some of these groups and you will pay them money for information. That's how this goes. And that's what they were doing here. And the issue or the grand jury where they found they broke the law was the fact that they weren't telling their donors this. Donate to us if you want to fight hate crime. Donate to us if you want to fight the far right. But nothing have they ever publicized is that they were giving money to informants to be able to infiltrate these groups. So that's the steelman argument. That's the goodwill argument of this group. However, the other piece of it is what people believe is happening, and we will see proof to coming days, I'm sure, as they dig more into this, is that they weren't just paying informants, is that they were actively funding these groups and encouraging them to carry out hate crimes, in order to stoke fears of racism, stoke fears of hatred, and to be able to push legislation for censorship. That is the other side that is likely happening. People believe it's happening behind the scenes. As I said, the good faith argument is, oh, we were just paying informants and we just weren't telling people who are donating to us that's what we're doing. But the reality is, I wouldn't say the reality, but the other side that people are alleging is happening and is very likely could be happening is that they were just funding these groups, period, in order to stoke fear and hatred in the country and encourage censorship laws to come down the pipe. That's where people think this is likely going to go. You had the likes of Charlie Kirk. Oops, sorry. Let's pull this up here quickly for you folks. So this is kind of from the U.S. Department of Justice. And this is kind of, again, the breakdown of where some of these funds have gone. Again, $3 million have gone to these various groups. So $1 million plus has gone to the National Alliance affiliate. $300,000 has gone to the Aryan Nations affiliate. $270,000 has gone to the Unite the Right member. $140,000 has gone to former National Alliance chairman. $73,000 has gone to the former KKK members. And then $19,000 has gone to American Front president and felon. That's where all this money's gone. That's where, at least that's what the U.S. Department has released. And that's what Charlie Kirk had to say about this group. Again, this is a bit of a long read, long sag, and he tweeted this, posted this May of 2025, so a little under a year ago. He wrote this. The SPLC has added Turning Point to their ridiculous hate group list, right next to the KKK and neo-Nazis, a cheap smear from a washed-up org that's been fleecing scared grandmas for decades. They somehow still rake in over $100 million a year peddling their hate map nonsense, sitting pretty in their Montgomery poverty palace, while crying about hate to their line their pockets. Even former staffers called their racket a con. Their game plan? Scare financial institutions into debanking us, pressure schools to cancel us, and demonize us so some unhinged lunatic feels justified targeting us. Okay. You know, that's wild to read that, eh? But continue. Remember, the Family Research Council and SPLC-inspired gunmen went after them. They'd love nothing more than to see TPUSA in the crosshairs. But it's 2025, and nobody with a functioning brain buys their garbage anymore. The SPLC is a laughingstock, a hollowed-out husk of an organization that's been exposed as a grift time and time and time again. They're just irrelevant. They're a cautionary tale of how to torch your own credibility. Maybe someone should take a hard look at where all that nonprofit money is really going. Being on their list is a badge of honor. It means they're terrified that we're so effective. Keep crying, SPLC. America's done with your scam. So, unfortunately, a little bit prophetic in what he shared here, how a lot of this work led to violence against specific groups. Unfortunately, the head of TPUSA being one of them who was assassinated last year. But this is the warning he gave about the SPLC. And he said it's only a matter of time to find out where this money is really going. And I think we're about to start finding out where. And today, it's about, we were just giving money to informants and we didn't properly document where that money was, or didn't properly inform our donors of where that money is going. Tomorrow, I could imagine we'll likely find out darker details of what was actually happening with this money. And giving it to informants may have been turned into more of funding specific actions to stoke and create a specific political narrative. So, why do I start the show with this American story? I'll say that. Why do I start this show with that? Well, we have our own SPLC up here in Canada, and they are called the Canadian Anti-Hate Network. And some say, well, Josh, what are you doing? Is it really the same? Well, they have a similar mission. Very similar mission. They go after the far right. They call themselves the Canadian Anti-Hate Network, yet they only focus on one type of hate. And they make sure to push forward specific agendas in order to be able to push specific policy in Parliament. They were very much a big mover behind the bill of C-63 in order to censor the internet because of the far right. And Josh, you can say maybe it's a distant connection, maybe. However, the likes of some journalists here in this country and have kind of uncovered and called this stuff out. And that journalist was Andy Lee, who called out the connection of the Canadian Anti-Hate Network to the SPLC. She made sure to post this PDF, which was written and created by the Canadian Anti-Hate Network in August of 2023, where they wanted pre-budget money to go towards their cause. As they're kind of detailing what they wanted $25 million a year for 5 years to an anti-hate action program to counter far-right organizing and its impact as part of Canada's action plan on combating hate. Number two, that the government commit the necessary funding for Stats Can to survey Canadians about hate crimes annually as part of the general social survey. But again, only specific hate crimes, not the ones that, I don't know, might be funded by the IRGC, the Khalistanis, Islamic extremists, all those. We're not interested in that. But number three, catch this. That the government commit $1 million a year for 5 years to the Canadian Anti-Hate Network to give Canada an anti-hate watchdog organization on par with the SPLC in the USA, Hope Not Hate in the UK, and the Amadou Antonio Foundation in Germany. So that's just the first moment where they highlight the SPLC and their connection. But if you go in further through the document of what they're all about, the Canadian Anti-Hate Network has received funding in the past through the government's anti-racism action program. The Bank of Montreal, Unifor, philanthropists Mohammed Fike, and Gary and Donna Slate, and the Southern Poverty Law Center. We'd like to thank each of our 2,184 donors in the anti-hate community. With over 50,000 followers on social media, plus the numerous interviews we give media, the Canadian Anti-Hate Network has one of the largest audiences of any nonprofit our size. So not only do they talk about in this document that they are modeled after the SPLC, they also have received funding from the SPLC. This is our Canadian version of the SPLC. And this is what they do. They're very clear that they really only go after specific types of hate. They made sure to highlight it on their website right here. Their priority areas are neo-Nazism, white nationalism, militant accelerationism, 764 calm, nihilistic, violent extremism, Canadian nationalism, Christian nationalism, anti-2S LGBTQ plus movements, male supremacist movements, anti-gender movements. Again, they're only focused on a specific agenda, specific groups of anti-hate, but they call themselves the Canadian Anti-Hate Network in order to deceive people. Because of course, you call yourself anti-hate, well, who is it going to be against that? Who would be against that? Well, but our only focus is specific kinds of hate-motivated events, and we'll make sure we stop them. So, seeing what we're seeing happen in the SPLC down in the States, and the connection they have to the Canadian Anti-Hate Network up here, I would imagine we'll probably find similar forms of fraud from this organization. And I'm sure that's just the start of it. So we know this is kind of how they operate, right? We talked about this. I did the video on this a long time ago involving the Canadian Anti-Hate Network. How they work with organizations, pollsters like ECOS, to create an agenda-driven, well, let's call it what it is, studies. Agenda-driven studies. And then they go ahead, get those studies done. ECOS fabricates and creates the narrative that the Canadian Anti-Hate Network wants to create. Then they go ahead and take that and start publishing on their websites. They push it out to numerous news outlets, and then you get the headline. Poll says X amount of Canadians are terrified for their lives from far-right groups, or something along those lines. And then they create the narrative. And it continues to spin and spin and spin and spin until they're able to impact policy on Parliament Hill and introduce specific legislation and policy that, well, infringes on your rights of freedom of speech and brings censorship to our country. This group is 100% a mechanism behind a lot of those policies. I'll show you an example of what I mean. So this is a CBC article from 2022. Anti-hate group, okay, again, very broad term, but anti-hate group calls for regulator to police social media platforms. Again, it's not after the convoy. We need to have a regulator to police the social media platforms now, folks. And so when you see what's going on with the SPLC and what people believe the SPLC could be involved in, well, seeing how involved the likes of the anti-hate network is involved and funded by the government of Canada, as you see on their website here, seeing how connected and close they are and how they get consistent funding from the government, well, you can see this is definitely probably playing as an arm of the government to create specific narratives so that they can push specific policy on us. It all comes together. So I don't think it's far off the mark. Again, this is just now. This is one man's perspective. This is not truth. This is not fact. This is just one man's perspective putting the puzzle pieces together. Seeing the money these guys get, how much they get funded to, the connections to the SPLC, and we're seeing what they're doing south of the border. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that if you remember in the convoy, the Nazi hate elements of the convoy, remember those guys? Guys who showed up with the Nazi flags and then disappeared as quickly as they appeared. Just in time, though, to make sure Justin Trudeau's photographer got the photo. Snapshot. I don't think it's far off to look into how maybe, just maybe, money from the Canadian Anti-Hate Network likely went into funding elements of that protest to create a specific narrative that we still have to listen to this day. The convoy is far right. They hate our government. They hate Canada. They're a bunch of Nazis. Look at all the Nazi flag photo. I don't think it's too far off that they were, knowing that CAHM, an extension of this Liberal government who works with ECOS, CBC, to push specific narratives to condition the Canadian people. That's likely what we are currently seeing. And again, another example here. Again, with them, another example of them working with ECOS. This is a poll they had done, commissioned by ECOS. Results of the poll. Poll on online hate conducted by the Canadian Anti-Hate Network and ECOS Research, and they went into all this type of stuff and things that they learned in the last few months. Have you experienced or seen any hate or racism online, such as offensive name-calling, content inciting violence, sexism, homophobia, physical threats, or sexual harassment? And they create this whole study, and they go ahead and they start pushing it to the likes of the CBC and the CTV, and they publish it. Anti-hate poll says, there you go. That's what we are seeing in real time. What does the chat have to say about this is my question. What's the chat saying this morning? Mark says, early 2026, Carney's total trade balance remained in a deficit, reaching $5.7 billion in February 2026, as a shrinking surplus with the U.S. was outweighed by a widening gap of deficits with other global partners. There you go. Jay English says, honestly infuriating, losing our family and best trading partner for our biggest security threat. Great. Thanks, Josh. Yeah, no problem, dude. JP Alberta First says, the quote-unquote concessions, again, this is alluding back to earlier stories, are completely justified. The Americans see the liberal position of not engaging to get a deal. This is them saying either come to the table seriously or don't bother and live with the consequences. Agreed. Bandit 249 Saw says, correct. They said they are combating hate, but really they were causing hate. Biden administration buried this. That's actually a good point. That was brought up. Again, this is all hearsay at this point because we saw members of the Trump administration bring this up, I believe, on Laura Ingram's show last night, where they said that Biden's administration was looking into the SPLC, looking at the story, and then they kind of just quietly closed it. Don't know why, but they did. And then it was picked back up by the Trump administration. Well, first off, it was through a grand jury. The Trump administration didn't even pick this one up until the grand jury made their decision on this. And then all of a sudden, we're looking into it. So, Sudasol Silver says, when the government said it's for the children or for your safety, It actually means we are using your empathy and fear to pass censorship laws. Yeah, and I think that's the thing, isn't it? People ask the question often, how does Canada descended into what it is currently today? How are they so easily manipulated the way they've been? And it goes back to the typical Canadian trait. One of our biggest strengths has been used as our biggest weakness. We are incredibly empathetic people. And that goodwill and empathy has been weaponized against us to make us guilty about our past, guilty of our country, make us feel bad about our skin color, where we're from, in order to push more of an agenda to clamp down on us. That's what we're witnessing. So that empathy that comes so natural to Canadians and it's embedded in our culture over the years, has been weaponized. And that's what we're seeing in real time. And that's why Canada has descended into what it is. And then you throw a Donald Trump in the mix, and it's just one big cocktail of craziness. Scotty War says, don't think for a second that this doesn't happen in Canada. The comparisons between the Dems and the LPC are many. Yes, agreed. They are very well connected, the Democrat Party and the Liberal Party of Canada. More than they'd like to admit. Marcon Blanco says Carney's annual trade deficits with all countries, excluding the USA, in 2025 was $112.9 billion, according to StatsCan. The annual trade surplus with the US was as follows, $81.6 billion in 2025. There you go. There's some facts for the homies. Nylock says, got a hold of Keith Wilson yesterday. CC'd you on an email with him to connect with the two of you to make planning easier. Hope you have a great interview. Thank you, man. Much appreciated. I'll get on top of that. But here we go. This is where we are currently at. And I think I was really important to kind of talk about these things because we are now watching what is taking place in real time with, well, the likes of Stephen McKinnon, the Liberal Party. Now that they have their manufactured majority, they're doing what we thought they were going to do. They could have done one of two things. They could have prorogued Parliament and then reset everything, which I don't know if they really wanted to do that, but that's what they went ahead and did. That's what they could have done, I should say, is reset the whole agenda, reset committees, and take full control. Or number two, keep the 45th Parliament going the way it is, and then just add people to the committee so you can stack them, and then you just increase your voting. So committees stays as they are, but then you just impact how many votes Liberals have. So that's what Stephen McKinnon tweeted at an announcement yesterday. The Liberal House leader says, our government is committed to working hard on an ambitious agenda to build Canada strong. Are you now? Wow. Took you a whole year to figure out the whole situation with the United States and how you want to attack it, but congratulations. He says, Liberals now comprise a majority of MPs in the House of Commons. Prime Minister Mark Carney and his government are determined to work constructively both in the House and in parliamentary committees. There is an undeniable, long-standing principle in Parliament. A party that has the majority of seats in the House also has a majority in committees. For that reason, I intend to give notice of a motion that reflects this principle to be considered in the House in the coming days, and essentially is put forward a motion to stack the committees. So we've known with this Liberal government that transparency isn't exactly something they care very much about. And that's a characteristic that can really be said about any governing party. You know, people are people, systems are corrupt. That's how things go. However, in this case, these folks do not want to be held accountable whatsoever. And, well, they're going to continue that. At the very minimum, since they were so awful at, with their lack of transparency and trying to hide things, at least we had committees. At least we had committees where the Conservatives had a lot of the power and could investigate specific issues into the corruption of the Liberal Party of Canada. And they were successful in doing that, and a lot of the time. A lot of the information we know about the Liberal Party of Canada came through committees. A lot of the corruption came through committees, uncovered. Two Randys is one to think about. We have a plethora of situations of corruption that this Liberal government has come out through committees. It's an important thing. But now, Liberals stacking it allows them to essentially put a wet blanket on all of it, and now they can cover up everything. Now they can cover up everything. And this is the thing, is they can go ahead and do that. I don't think it'll end well for them. It won't end well for them. Some of the comments are fascinating in this. Rick Perkins, former MP, says, "Too funny, Steve. For you guys, cooperation means capitulation." He's not wrong. Wyatt Claypool says, "You know it would be a sign that you have nothing to hide by not forcing the ethics committee ethics community to have a liberal majority." I think he meant to say committee there. To have a liberal majority and leave at least that one untouched. What legislative need is there to stack that committee? None. It's just to shut down investigations. Yeah. That's what we're seeing in real time right now. That's what we're seeing in real time right now. Them trying to manufacture majority, them trying to get outright control, is to have no accountability, is to use powers the way they want to see it use powers, and what that benefits them to do. And as well, they'll now take control of committees to bury everything they do. SNC Lavalin, another scandal that came out through committees. So, I didn't come out through committees, but it came out, but was able to be investigated through committees. Those are just a couple stories of the great work committees have done to hold such a corrupt government accountable. Sorry, folks, got something in my throat. But yeah, so that's what they're moving to do next. But as I said, yesterday was a little fun. That's an unfortunate freeze frame. But yesterday was fun. We had Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney. I'd say mainly Pierre Poilievre doing what he does in the House of Commons yesterday. And this is going to be kind of like this last part of the show is going to be a little messy because we're going to be jumping around a lot, and I'm doing it live, so I don't have any edits to do this with. However, I watched this last night into this morning, and I was just dying of laughter watching what I was watching. Because what's going to happen here, the argument that a lot of liberals are going to make is Poilievre is being childish. He's a jerk. We hate him. This is why Canadians hate him. No. This is why you guys hate him. You realize everything liberals are doing right now is to remove any type of transparency and anyone calling them out. So you manufacture a majority. Now you're going to try and stack committees to prevent transparency. And now you want the leader of the opposition gone. Probably the most effective opposition leader of all time. I'll say of all time, he's been the most effective. Who's the only one who's calling out your BS? Of course you'd want him to go. Of course you want the Conservative Party to can him. Of course. Because who is behind him? Nobody. And conservatives, I'll tell you this right now, and I mean mainly conservative voters, people who watch the show, don't ever fall for the liberal BS that we should just can Poilievre. Because they know we have nobody behind him, and nobody who will be as successful and effective as he's been. So of course they want him gone, because that would essentially decimate the Conservative Party for at least a couple years, leaving liberals completely scot-free to do whatever they so please without any real opposition. They've bought off the media. They've manufactured majority. They're stacking the committees. They can get rid of the opposition leader. No problems. So seeing how frustrated liberals get here with what we're going to watch in this question period. It's how frustrated. I'm going to highlight their frustration. Because what they end up doing in response to a lot of what Poilievre's questions were citing off a bunch of their BS policies that aren't helping anybody. And then ending off with, enough with the rhetoric. Does the rhetoric upset you? Does the truth upset you? Just maybe. Just maybe. Let's do this together. So Mark Carney answered a few questions to start out. And again, this is kind of the Mark Carney answers. And these are important to hear, important to listen to, because it sets the stage for what we're going to see here going on forward.
This is increase.
Let's Make sure we get to the English side of this. There we go.
To fill their grocery carts without emptying their bank accounts. But yesterday, that we learned that for the fourth month in a row, Canada had the highest food price inflation in the G7 under this Liberal Prime Minister. All the other G7 countries have the same tariffs and wars and other global factors as we do, but it is under this Prime Minister that Canadians are paying the most, the fastest. Yet he made a bizarre comment on March 25th where he said that affordability is the best it's been in over a decade. Families who are turning back items at the grocery checkout, young people who can't afford homes, know he's wrong. Will he admit that he was wrong?
Mr. Speaker, the record is that every month that I've been Prime Minister, Canadian average wages have grown faster than the rate of inflation. Every month I've been Prime Minister, rents have fallen relative to wages. And you know what? There's more good news, Mr. Speaker, because on June 5th, over 12 million Canadians are going to receive the Groceries and Essentials benefit top-up. A boost today and a bridge to tomorrow.
So that's the opening question, right? That Poilievre hits him with is, you said April 25th that Canada's the most affordable it's ever been in 10 years. Those are your words. So are you going to apologize that what you said was wrong? Are you going to acknowledge that you're wrong? Or are you going to double down and say you're right? Either way, we like the answer. And so, of course, in question period, this is what happens, is he doesn't answer the question. He says, well, since I've been Prime Minister, this, and this have happened. Even though, again, cherry-picking stats to make him look a specific way. But, of course, that's the argument people are going to make. It's like, well, he has only been the Prime Minister for 1 year. Why is Poilievre taken into account on the last 10 years? Because Poilievre is just using the measure that Mark Carney's using. Mark Carney said the last 10 years, Canada's been the most affordable than it's been the last 10 years. That's the argument he's making here. Now he wants to change the game and say, well, I've only been Prime Minister for 1 year. No. You said, because of your leadership, Canada's the most affordable today than it's been in 10 years. And that's the clarity that Poilievre hits on throughout this question period consistently. And that's what he ends up doing, is Poilievre just keeps throwing it at him. He answers a couple times, but doesn't actually answer the question whatsoever. And then this is where it starts getting fascinating, is Pierre Poilievre gets up for his second batch of questioning. And then it gets wild.
Into Canada from the U.S.
Mr. Speaker, I gave the Prime Minister to correct the chance to correct the record, and he refused to do so. On March 25th, he made an inaccurate comment. He claimed that affordability was the best that it had been in over a decade. Rent has doubled in that decade. The cost of food is up 40%. The cost of beef is up 70%. The cost of mortgages is up well over 60%. And every Canadian knows that he got it wrong. He can't possibly fix a problem if he doesn't know it exists. Exactly. So will he stand up today, admit that he got it wrong, and admit that life has never been more expensive for Canadians?
The Honourable Minister of Jobs and Family.
So you see it there as he's sitting down. You see Poilievre kind of go, and you're like, what's going on? Well, it's because Poilievre wants to debate Carney on this specific issue. And Carney kept deflecting throughout. And so when he asked the question again, Mark Carney stays seated. You see here. He's just chilling out, back in the seat, twirling something. I don't know. He's actually twirling. He's just sitting like this, doing his thing. And Patty Hajdu decides to step up and answer the question.
Ago, the leader of the opposition was talking about single mothers. And Mr. Speaker, what I'd like to say to all the single moms across the country is we've got your back. We've got your back with the Canada Child Benefit payment that is indexed to inflation, so that when the costs go up, so does your payment, something the Conservatives voted against. We've got your back when it comes.
And we're not going to play the whole thing out, but I want you to give you the idea throughout the theme that every time a Liberal stands up to answer a question here, it's all about a program here. We're giving money here. We're giving money here. Everything they do is print money and give it away. It's literally when they're bragging about all the things they've done has been inflationary in nature, causing the issue that we currently have. But this is the game that's played. And so I just want to keep playing mainly the situation when Poilievre asks a question and seeing the reaction that happens is mainly what I want to get at moving forward here. So Patty answers the question. Poilievre stands up and does this.
Leader of the opposition.
And And now the Prime Minister has gone in the witness protection program, Mr. Speaker. 70% of the time he doesn't even show up to answer questions, and then he refuses to stand up for affordability.
Oh, come on, you hear the Liberals. Oh, come on, man. You can't say that. Stop it. It's not fair. Someone, referee, speaker, do something. Speaker's just like, I'm a Liberal. I like just getting paid for doing nothing. So I love how the Liberal logic's now been, well, used against them in question period these days.
He made the comment that affordability was the best it's been in over a decade. This after the number of people lined up at food banks has doubled. The rent has doubled. The cost of food is up 40%. We have the worst food price inflation in 40 years, and the Prime Minister cannot even stand in his place and debate me and answer the question, will he admit that he got it wrong on affordability like everything else?
And you see the reaction again there. He sits down, asking Carney the question, and then another Liberal member steps up. But this is the thing is, I'm going to try and boost the volume here. Listen to what the Conservatives are yelling across the aisle, because you know who ends up standing up. Listen to what they say.
Colleagues, order. The Honourable Minister of... Okay, let's calm down. The Honourable Minister of Jobs and Families.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's clear we hit it.
Sorry, I messed up on that one. But however, there was still some good stuff there where they're yelling at Mark Carney, show some leadership, stand up. What are you doing? That was a lot of things that were being said there. But I want to skip to the next piece here when Poilievre stands up, asks the same question, and we get a different camera angle this time. That things are getting interesting when you get a different camera angle, because at this point, Pierre Poilievre isn't looking towards speaker anymore. He's directed his focus across the aisle at Mark Carney. That's when you know things are getting intense.
Mr. Speaker, he goofed up. He stood up and claimed that Canadians have never had it so good, claiming that affordability is the best that it's been in over a decade, during which time housing costs have doubled, food bank lineups have doubled, Canadians cannot afford to eat. So why won't he have the courage to stand up, admit that he goofed up, and apologize to Canadians for the price he's making them pay?
The Honourable Secretary.
So here you go. This is the fun one. So Poilievre sits down and listen to now the Conservatives just jeering across the aisle because of the next person who stands up to answer the question, who isn't Mark Carney.
Price he's making them pay.
The Honourable Secretary. The Honourable... No, wait. The Honourable...
So you got Frank Caputo standing up, just jeering, yeah. You got Larry Brock, who sees Wayne Long stand up, okay? Wayne Long stand up. And Larry Brock's like, we don't want to hear from you. We want to hear from the Prime Minister. Then you hear another Conservative from the backbench yell, hey, Conor McGregor called. So you can guess who was going to be talking next.
Mr. Speaker, that past Conservative leader, that current Conservative leader have 45 years experience between the two of them.
And I'm not going to waste my time with what he has to say. My point is it got heated a various amount of points in this question period. And Pierre Poilievre kept applying the pressure over and over and over again. Liberals were upset. They were getting annoyed. You're going to have Wayne Long here. You're going to have Vancouverton speak up and who's going to answer the next one. And it's always the same stuff that you guys have done nothing. Stop with the rhetoric. It's just crybaby nonsense. And so you're going to see this a lot on social media. This is why people hate Pierre Poilievre. And that's all right. Pierre, keep doing what you're doing. You keep tanking your numbers. Keep doing that. Here's the thing. It goes back to what I've been saying. Do I think this is an effective approach to get Canadians on your side? Not right now. No, I don't think it is. However, question period doesn't really get watched by a whole lot of people. The voters you want to attract and you want to bring to your side aren't watching question period because they're too busy trying to survive. Okay? They're not watching Question Period. Even the clips that might pop up on TikTok aren't really performing that great of Question Period. So this is what I'm saying. There's a two-prong approach to this. Well, maybe, just maybe. Let's think about this for a second. Keep doing what you're doing, Pierre. Look at what he's getting them so mad. And I think that's the time to use Question Period. Or just keep getting under, answer the question. You're not going to answer the question. You're not going to be transparent. You're not going to be what the people need you to be. You can keep screwing over Canadians. Okay, fine. I'm going to continue to be an absolute jerk and annoy you, get under your skin, frustrate you, get you off your game. Say you're bad at economics and see that make you unravel. Think this is a good part of the strategy. Get the people going, at least in the House of Commons, because no one's watching it anymore. I've seen the comments right now. Question Period's a waste of time. No one answers any questions. You're right. However, they got to be there. And if they're not there, then that's what gets highlighted. This is where we're at right now. I think Pierre needs to keep being Pierre in the House of Commons. Keep being the jerk. But when they're out of the House of Commons, be prime ministerial, show leadership. Because those are the sound bites, those are the press conferences that get pushed to the people. Highlights in Question Period typically don't make it to the news. They make it on shows like this, but they don't go to the CBCs of the world. So who cares? Light up the Liberals in Question Period. Light up the Liberals in Parliament. Then when you're outside the walls of Parliament, be prime ministerial and show people that you are a real option for prime minister. Let's see what the chat's saying, though. Nylock says, Alberta independence is just getting stronger each day. Fair play. I'm not surprised. Marcon Blanco says, does BS or real numbers motivate voters? BS. Emotional BS specifically is what motivates voters, unfortunately. Mike Stewart says, just so you all know, we Canadians are being called China's dogs on Chinese state media. What does that tell you? Please send me that article and that news. I want to see some of that. That seems interesting. That'd be great content to kind of dig into. True-blooded Canadian says, I'm a single father with 2 girls. I spend about $1,200 to $1,400 a month in just groceries alone. Gee, that grocery rebate does not help me out at all. $533 is a joke. One-time payment, my booty. He didn't say booty, though. True-blooded Canadian also says, instead of throwing money at us, why don't you fix the problem? Carney is not helping us at all. Just throwing money at us to shut us up. It's the liberal way. It's the liberal way to do things, of course. Funny Crazy Production says, QP needs to be shown at different times everywhere. Fair play. Jay English says, gun ban, do not comply. Taxes, don't pay them. Some with my money being used to launder and make more of them. Effing done. Yeah, gee. That's where we're at. Let's finish off with this story, though. This is something I thought was fascinating. We had Janice Charette, Canada's lead negotiator, was on a panel talking about where things are at with the United States, and man, her tone is awfully different from the likes of Mark Carney. And this is from CBC Watcher.
Just start with what might be a statement of the blindingly obvious, which is that I call it USMCA these days because I spent all my time in the US, but the US-Mexico-Canada trade agreement is a good agreement. It is an agreement that brings benefits to businesses, to employers, to workers and families and communities in the United States, in Mexico, and in Canada. It's really the framework that underpins this marketplace, which is the envy of the world. And it's just a few numbers. You know, the North American market, 506 million consumers with a combined GDP of $42 trillion. Canada is the #1 customer of the United States. In fact, 39 million Canadians buy more goods from the United States than 2.8 billion people from the combination of Japan, the UK, and China together. So we are an important customer for them. Our FDI into the United States, foreign direct investment into...
So there you go. She sounds more like Pierre Poilievre and his viewpoint on the Canadian-United States relationship, doesn't she? This is a very different rhetoric than the likes of Mark Carney saying, comparing himself to a war hero in the War of 1812, saying the United States is a weakness to us. Very different. So this is the thing. Signal and noise. Signal and noise. What is true and what is real? Well, Carney wants you to hear what he wants you to hear. You have to know that. You have to know that anything you see from him is typically what he wants you to see. He doesn't want you to see this. That's why, these types of clips don't really get a whole lot of play on the mainstream media, because they want you to keep you afraid, scared, uncertain, hating the Americans so that they can stay in power, because they know that is all they have left, and the conservatives own them on everything else. That's the reality. And there was something I just saw in the general chat here, which I thought was, I want to call this out, an allusion to kind of what we were talking about earlier. So the CRTC permitted CPAC to cancel committee reporting. And there's some truth to that. They allowed it to happen because of budget constraints. So CPAC typically doesn't show as much of the committee hearings anymore. So it's reliant on shows like ours to have to go in and probably pull those and display those, because they're on the Parliament website. But CPAC doesn't show them anymore. Again, it's funny how the funding cuts are to places that oversee and provide oversight to government work. Just conveniently. Here we are. They want you to see what they want you to see. And that's why our show will continue providing an option to see what is unspoken and talk about the real stuff behind the scenes. That's the reality. We'll finish off with a couple last minute super chats and we'll call it a day. Bandit249 Saw, who is an American, said this: I would love to see Trump in action if we had a question period. That would, yeah, the Americans had a question period, it would be wild. Because I already see what some of those committees are like in the down there in Congress and stuff like that. And some of those committee meetings are wild. I can imagine if you had a question period every day. And then Trump in question period. Oh man, it would just, I think the Democrats just get so frustrated because he would just be so Trump-like in it. It'd be wild. Marco Blanco says your taxes pay for your trade deficits with other countries like the EU and China. China, approximately $30.6 billion. America loves you guys. Much appreciated, Mark. Much appreciated. And we'll leave it all there, folks. Y'all are fantastic. It's been a good time to be alive and kind of give you an idea of what's going on with the SPLC, the connection to the Canadian Anti-Hate Network here in Canada. And we'll continue looking into the type of work they are doing just to, see if they're actually reporting on hate or manufacturing hate. But I'll leave it there. Whatever it is you're doing, wherever you are, I love you. Have a good one. Peace.